Yes. Well, I was kind of thinking about the more sort of broader democratic stuff. It's interesting because it ties back in a bit to what you were saying about the commons. Because what I was thinking when you were talking about that was, when they talk about commons, they also talk about commons regimes. And that's like the processes that people have for deciding how they use that land and for making sure that use is fair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And something that we've both become more and more interested in is like, alternative democratic ways of doing things, because that's another part of the commons, is how we make decisions together. And the way that our politics has kind of developed has become quite exclusive of ordinary people.
Yeah.
You get to vote once every 4 or 5 years, but actually you get so little input into anything beyond that, and we've ended up with this kind of Punch and Judy. I don't know what the parallel is in Scotland, because it's a little bit more diverse, but
a little bit, but
not that much more diverse.
Actually, I saw First Minister's questions yesterday, and I actually think it's actually going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, well, it's still people kind of bashing each other and point scoring, which is just not what we need. And so we've kind of been looking into
other paradigms.
But what you want is deep disagreement. It's not like you want people to agree. You want absolutely fundamental disagreement and to really thrash it out. So it's not, people think that either you have a kind of like Punch and Judy show where at least you've got different things, or you've got everybody kind of in a boring Blairite consensus. And it's like, no. Like, so for example, we have a real issue around this ecological emergency and the need to transform how we're dealing with that. On the other hand, when you have a real social justice issue, how do you do that in a way that really does take care of people? Now, trying to thrash that out is really fundamental, rather than just saying, ecological emergency, deal with that, and actually then it being those in power controlling everybody else so that we deal with it, but in a way that trashes people. Or we just say, we need to roll out economic growth as fast as we can so that people are, who are poor are going to get richer. We need to see it as a much more fundamental problem. So you need real politics, and that's what deliberative democracy is about, is actually going for the fundamental issues and really just,
and I guess the where it ties back into the kind of engineering problem is that it's not just an engineering problem, because if it was, then we would be doing it already. There's whole lots of different levels of nuance to that, and also if we did just decide to solve this through engineering, we would miss all kinds of things, because I think what the problem is at the heart of politics is that it's deeper than politics. It's more like at the heart of the kind of system that we're running at the moment, that politics is an expression of, is that it cuts people off from their empathy from one another. And we need to have a politics that's much more emotional, basically, that allows for the fact that we're emotional, both in terms of kind of really caring for one another and being empathic to, what someone else's life is like.
Yeah.
And
there's
also
a huge dearth and lack of that in the way that, for example, our social security system, the way disabled people are treated, the way that, EU citizens and, asylum seekers, the whole... What you're saying is just absolutely so true. Sorry for interrupting,
no,
but
that's fine.
I just feel so. I think I agree with you so strongly.
Yeah. So there's that bit. There needs to be so much more heart in there, but also there has to be an acknowledgement that we get into states. We get furious, unreasonably, and we stigmatise people because. Of stuff that's happened to us. We're really complex. And actually there's a huge amount of understanding of how people work and how our emotions can get sort of tangled up. And it's not something that we like to speak about, because there's complexity and there can be embarrassment and shame in there as well. But actually, if we could just be more honest and more human with one another, I think that we could create a decision-making system between us that was really deeply, deeply human, and where, yes, there was disagreement, but there was also real listening and a real sense that, everybody's got different needs, and they come from, those come from different experiences that we've had.
Are there any places that you're aware of in your travels or in your studies where you can see that there's a little chink of hope that, that where that's starting to happen more successfully?
I can. I've been sort of on a course learning about sociocracy, for the last year, which is a really interesting system. It's not particularly, it doesn't particularly talk about emotions, but there's a lot of talk about non-violent communication in it, because it understands that the way that we speak to one another, the way that we relate to one another, is a big part of what gets in the way of us making good decisions together. But it's an attempt to create decision-making processes that are effective in the way that top-down, it's often quite effective. Everyone knows who's the boss. They can say what's to happen. Everyone else goes away and does it. Although I've spoken to quite a lot of people who say, well, yeah, that's the theory. It doesn't actually necessarily work like that. And horizontal sort of equality, which can often be a bit sort of ramshackle and nobody quite knows what everyone else is doing and everyone gets into stooshies together. Yeah. But it's an attempt to kind of formulate something that lies a bit in between that. And it's got loads to offer. And I think it's got loads to offer politics.
And is that also part and parcel how you see citizens' assemblies? That some of that sociocracy kind of thinking can inform how they work?
I think it can do. I mean, I think that what we've got in citizens' assemblies is a really, really good start. Yeah. And I think that a whole lot of different democratic processes, they're all out there at the moment, and actually they're kicking up quite a lot of dust. People are getting quite excited about them, and I think we're in the process of creating new forms that we don't even know yet, that will be hybrids of all of these.
But it doesn't yet. They don't yet have the emotional intelligence, so they're great. Citizen assemblies and those. I mean, what you describe in sociocracy is an emotionally intelligent process. What I saw in Birmingham with the UK one was actually you still had experts coming along presenting stuff as if they knew what they were talking about. Now, if it was a genuine process, Chris Stark from who's from up this way, but who chairs the climate change committee in Westminster, would have admitted that his take was just one take, rather than presenting it as if it was the take. I mean, that's really what you're talking about, is people being willing to actually admit that they're not always right. And as we find in our politics and in our campaigning, people are always trying to say they're right and everybody else is wrong. And it's like, that is not a way. And I guess it's more that in Extinction Rebellion, the ways that we're getting, particularly with Eva's input too, the ways that we're facilitating and enabling decisions to be made is much more in that emotionally intelligent way. So we're hoping that will come through, but that's definitely not there yet.
I mean, I it's probably 3 or 4 years at least back now. I went along to an evening in Glasgow that Commonweal set up, and it was about citizens' assemblies. So they had Brett Heddick there talking. So he's he's written a couple of books about it, but he's obviously very, very keen. And they got him to do a plan for how we could, when Scotland's independent, we will probably at some point need a second chamber, a viewing chamber. Both countries have one, and the Commonweal said to him, tell us how the second chamber for Scotland could be modelled on citizens' assemblies. Yeah. And I went along and I read, and I thought, it's highly idealistic, that'll never go on. And I mean, I thought that probably even about citizens' assemblies, never mind it being a reviewing chamber. But by the end of the evening, it kind of persuaded me and most people in the room, and it wasn't maybe not more than about 50 or 100 people there, if that. But so I've been following it, and then I read up about how successful they've been in Ireland. And it's as you said, Eva, it's a bit like the Irish politicians, for them to talk about same-sex marriage, changing the abortion approach to abortion. It's it's taboo. It's just from a point of view of a politician, it's maybe the end of your career. So it gets discussed at the Citizens' Assembly, but then they did, and they came back with such good recommendations that have now been accepted. Well, they're enacted now. I think they reported back to the Senate in Ireland. So, I mean, if we can get something like that going, I mean, I'd love it if we ended up with a citizens' assembly type set up for a reviewing chamber.
Well, it's something about trusting ordinary people. I mean, that's the basic of this. The shift it makes is it says that ordinary people, meaning all of us, are the best people possible to make decisions. Yeah. And this informed by expertise, but then deciding what they want to take from that. And that political parties and politicians are not the best people to decide. political issues or any issues. And so what you want is a system that ends up without a politics of parties, and where you put your party first. I believe in that, but my party comes first. Because you find that right across the spectrum. Instead, you've got people just deliberating on a particular issue, drawn together. Okay, what do we do about this? It stands to reason that's a sane politics. So if we need not just a second chamber, we need a first chamber that's like that too. We need a whole different approach to politics that has people at the heart of it, rather than politics.
I mean, is it also a bit, this is something maybe a bit more in parallel and not quite the same as citizen assemblies, but, Leslie Riddick has done such a good job with those nation films that she's done, looking at how things work in Norway, Iceland, the Faroes, and over there, especially, the way that local councils are just, well, they are local. I mean, with me, my local council's Glasgow. Yeah. And I'm not a cynic. I do think that people go in and get involved in that for good motives on the whole, and they are trying their best. But it's huge.
It's an impossible system, and it's even worse than that. Actually, it's worse than Leslie says, because you actually have community councils.
Yeah.
And they are designed, because I've been on ours I've stopped recently, but they're designed to take all the flack. So people go to their community council and shout about things, and it can do nothing. Yeah. So it's not even just that we have that, the Glasgow level is the lowest level. It's you have a lower one that's designed just to take the flak and make sure nothing happens. So it's a really appalling system.
And so people get frustrated with their local
with the community.
Yeah. So basically, it's a system that creates frustration.
It's designed. It's designed to not allow things to happen. In a sense. It's therefore not threatening. Yeah. So very different politics is perfectly possible. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And there's something also about the fact that people really rise to responsibility. That one of the things that really sort of stood out for me when looking into citizens' assemblies, and I was kind of reading up all about them because here's Extinction Rebellion. I'd never heard about them before then. And there's videos on YouTube of people coming out of them going, yes, no, I've really... There's a kind of brightness in their faces, and an incredulity. But you can see that people who weren't necessarily engaged with the issue before they came in have just totally stepped up to seriously considering this and really kind of bringing their best selves along to that conversation. And
it's a responsible position that people are put in. I mean, there's a lot asked.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the kind of apathy and cynicism that we see around a lot is to do with complete disempowerment and actually being given proper responsibility. It should be something that we're learning in school. How you take... Kids should be given so much responsibility.
So, instead we've got a system where, yes, we vote every now and again, but in schools and in most workplaces, somebody's in charge and telling you what to do.
Yeah.
So we're learning a completely feudal system when we need to be living a very democratic system. And in that democratic system, kids are empowered and life gets much more chaotic and much more fun, and it works.
Actually,
it certainly get more chaotic.
I was a teacher for many years. I'm retired now, but I do think... How old did you say your son was?
Oh, that one's 22.
Right. But see, in schools now, in primary schools and in secondary schools, Chloe, you're younger, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but to me there's a lot of emphasis on pupils' voices being heard and pupils being involved in decision making and pupil councils. Okay, I take your point. There is some of it is just lip service, but in a good school with good management, they actually do give real responsibility and a bit of power to pupils to, make decisions about, like the actual physical environment of the school. For example, choosing that, pupils asking, saying we don't have lockers, and, they pressurised for that, and sure enough they were put in, small decisions, but things that make a big difference to kids' lives.
Absolutely.
But then the really big decisions about curriculum and so on. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you see, if you change that, obviously I'm totally for that level that you described there, but if you change that to another level and actually kids then have so for example, one of the communities that the guys I lived with for a year and a half in Africa, it's actually the youth, the teenagers who make the decisions, really. That's the level where they know that's where the wisdom resides about the future. It's not the older people. It's those who can see the future ahead of them who are the ones who make the decisions. It's something about realising that teenagers are not this kind of nuisance body who we shouldn't listen to or whatever else. It's like seeing Greta and the school strike stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like these are the people who are really thinking ahead, and they're the people who need to be in a position of power. So it's kind of just turning on its head the way that we've been taught to think about stuff. So yes, we can input, but maybe they should be deciding.
Well, I think maybe on that... rebellious note and a completely radical note, we maybe need to draw things to a close. We've only got about 5 minutes left before the programme finishes. So Lou, it's fantastic having both of you over there. Sorry it got a little bit cut short with, for various kind of reasons that we couldn't just had to put up with, but maybe we'll get you back on.
We're just delighted that you were here. And it's been really fascinating speaking to you, and I know that we've had quite a few folk there asking questions and commenting that folk are enjoying what you've got to say.
Great, it's been really enjoyable. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Really,
So maybe
really.
you'll come back in the future another
Love to.
time.
Yeah,
If you're not banged up. And
Wish me luck next week. I've visited Stockton before, but I've never been in
we'll
it
bring
yet.
you a cake with a file in it.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to that. Ginger, please. Okay, great. Thanks a lot.